Happy Monday, and thank you for being here, for watching, for joining me. I have actually been meaning to talk about this topic specifically for a really long time. One of the reasons that I didn't address it during that MSC marathon was because I felt like it really needed some depth and some space to be able to dive in. I knew I wasn't going to do it in a 10-minute live stream. So, welcome to a not 10-minute live stream where we are going to talk about something very, very, very important. I honestly think this is one of the most important things I can talk about. And I think it's something that I've just really had to learn the hard way. So hopefully I can impart this upon you and it can be slightly easier for you, but it really has changed everything about how I've shown up in my business, what has made me feel more empowered and more confident in my business, what has allowed me to create more results faster, and ultimately what's allowed me to exist in this online space with all this noise coming in and kind of being able to filter what's true for me. So let's talk about what that thing is, shall we? I'm going to tell you what it is, and it's going to sound not all that exciting, probably. Maybe, I don't know. But then I'm going to explain it, and I think it's going to make a lot of sense. So stick with me if it feels not all that exciting initially. I see so many people jumping on, so if you're here, say hi. Thank you so much for being here. Brandy's, hi. I think you're going to love this one. So excited you're here. Okay, so the number one thing is that it's all a dichotomy. No, I'm kidding. Do you feel how exciting that is? Right? Doesn't seem that exciting at first, but I promise I'm going to explain it in a way that is going to be extremely exciting. Hi guys. Thank you all for being here. So here's the thing. It's all a dichotomy has become a phrase that has helped me so much in my business, because often I find a lot of things to be true that almost feel in conflict with each other in business. And when I have gotten to the point where I can be like, of course that makes sense because it's all a dichotomy, I have really been able to find my own path and navigate my own way. And so this might not be making sense yet, but let me give you a few examples. So the first example we're going to start with is this idea of boundaries versus generosity, right? I'm someone who talks a lot about having boundaries in your business, having clear expectations with your clients, being really boundaried about your time and your social media and your calendar and your calls and all of those things. For my Millionaire Makers Mastermind, we just did a whole month on time and like boundaries around time and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm also someone who talks all the time about serving, giving value, being super generous, right? And so what can happen is I think that can get confused in our brains, and our brains want to take it one way or the other. Does anybody know what I mean when I say like our brains want to take it one way or the other? Like, can you give me a hands up emoji if you have felt that way? Because what my brain used to want to do is be like, we're always about generosity and service. So everything is about generosity and service. And so when people need something, we're about generosity and service. Or it would be like, it's all about boundaries. So as many boundaries as possible, as often as possible, it's all about the boundaries, right? And I think you hear one or two of those things a lot in the online space. And the truth is, it's both. It's always a dichotomy. Like, it is both. You can have boundaries, and those boundaries allow you to serve and be really generous, right? And so one or the other is not true. They are both true, right? I am someone who has a lot of boundaries around my time and my social media, how much time I spend on Messenger, how much time I spend in this group, everything. I have a ton of boundaries around that. But when I am here, I'm very present. I will give as much value as humanly possible. I will connect with people in as many ways as possible. I will speak and teach freely and all of those things, but I have a lot of boundaries around it too. So that has been one thing that has been so helpful, and I'll use a ton of other examples, but when you can realize that it's always both and then figure out how to make that work for you, it gets so much easier. So another one that I hear all the time in this online space is this idea of feeling good versus pushing through, right? Or have it all feel good or be willing for it all to feel uncomfortable, right? And again, I feel like I say both of those things, and both of those things have become true for me in my business. right? It's always both. And once I finally let it be both and realized that, I really feel like that is the moment that I started navigating business in my own way and doing what actually served me, instead of feeling like, well, to be a successful business owner, it has to always feel good. Or to be a successful business owner, I have to always push through. Always both. It's like such a dichotomy. So let's talk about that. Brandy says, yes, feeling this. It's not either or, it's embracing the and. Exactly. And I think it's embracing your version of the and, right? So often we're like, well, I've heard that all successful business owners have boundaries. So I get really, 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 really boundaried, and I'm like barely serving or being generous at all, right? Or vice versa. And the same is true with things feeling good. So let's talk about that, because that's a huge one, which is this disparity between things should feel good and you should always be uncomfortable. And that confused me for a long time in my own business, where I was like, okay, but if things feel good and I don't feel uncomfortable, am I not pushing myself enough? Or if I'm always feeling uncomfortable, then am I not feeling good enough? And like, where's that line? And again, as soon as I gave myself permission for it to be both, I feel like so many doors blew open for me. High level, fundamentally, what it looks like for me is that it has to feel good. Meaning, I have to do things that are in alignment with my values and priorities and that make me feel good and that feel good in general, i.e. serving my community, being on live video with you guys, really, really, really showing up for my clients. That is so high value for me and feels so good. But in the moment, like on a Monday at 5, does it always feel perfectly good and simple and easy to show up? No. Right? Like there are sometimes I have to make myself. And then once I'm on, I love it and it's great. But there's definitely Mondays where at 5 p.m., I want to be on the couch. In fact, doing the MSC marathon, there were plenty of mornings where I did not want to be on live video at 7:30 a.m. If you know me, you know I'm not really that much of a morning person. But fundamentally, it felt so good for me to be able to connect in that way, to be able to serve my audience in that way, to be able to give you guys that value, right? In the moment, did it always feel good? No, and that's where I was able to push and stretch my comfort zone. But again, realizing that it's all a dichotomy there is such a game changer. So I would love to know for you, if you're listening or watching this, like what has been this like hard thing that you've had to navigate in business, whether it's the difference of feeling good or pushing through or being generous versus having boundaries. I have a few others that I'm going to talk about, but I would just love to know, if you're listening, what has been confusing there for you, or what have you had to work through? But there it was like navigating what ultimately feels good versus what feels good in the moment. And so what ultimately feels good may not always feel good in the moment, but that dichotomy of it being both. I think when we hear feel good, sometimes we take it to extremes and then we're like, oh, okay, well, I would just sit on the couch all day. You know, or like I wouldn't show up on live stream ever if I just did what felt good, you know? And it's like, it really can be both. Like it can feel really, really hard and stretching and like you have to push yourself to show up on live stream for the first time. And fundamentally that can feel good, right? So finding that balance, and I just want to overly explain all of this because I feel like the messaging around this in the online space is just massively confusing, right? So the next one that I think is really confusing is certainty versus detachment. Ooh, Natalie said perfection versus thoughtful. Hell yes, Natalie. Let's talk about that one. I really like that one. Hi, Stephanie. Amy says client services work and focusing on building my business in a way that excites me. Client services. Okay, got it. I love that, Amy. Okay, cool. I want to talk about all those. Those are so good. So certainty and detachment is a huge one that I hear come up with my clients all the time, because I'm always telling them, like, make a decision, get clear, get certain. What do you want? Then I'm also always telling them, be detached from the outcome, be detached, be detached. And so many of them are like, what the fuck? Am I certain? Am I detached? Like, what is going on? Because I feel like if I get certain, I get really attached. And I feel like if I get detached, I'm not certain. Right? And I think we hear this all the time in manifesting too. And it can be so fucking confusing, right? Brandy says, I think for me, I got caught up in posting all the time and making sure everything's perfect versus showing up when I'm inspired and embracing imperfection and messiness. Ooh, so good. Let's talk about that one too. Okay, so certainty and detachment. So for me, certainty is being insanely clear on what I want, and detachment is being okay if I never got it too. Being okay if it showed up in an entirely different way. Being okay if I had an entirely different experience, right? So I want to get clear and certain so I know what I want to work towards, and I know what I want it to look like, and I know the experience I want to have. And I have to detach from it enough where it's not like I'm so attached that I wouldn't be okay if this thing didn't happen, right? I think that is such an important dichotomy, right? Where I'm like so certain and clear on what I want, and I'm so fine if I don't get it. You know, where it feels like it's mine and it's there and it's true and all of those things, and I don't have to have it to be okay, right? And for me, that's that dichotomy of certainty and attachment, where I'm like so certain on the things I want, and I have to be detached enough that I know that fundamentally I will always be okay if I don't get it. I will always be okay. I will always have something better come along, right? Marina says, what a weird dichotomy, right? Exactly. And I think that dichotomy is the thing that we don't always give ourselves grace around in business. We think if we do things one way, it has to be that way. Like if we're really certain, there's no room for detachment, or if we're really detached, there's no room for certainty, or if we're really boundaried, there's no room for generosity, or if we're super generous, there's no room for boundaries, on and on and on. And when you can just say to yourself, like literally, that's my line. It's all a dichotomy, and I can just navigate what works for me in that, you know? Like I want to be certain in this way, and I'm going to detach in this way. I really feel like that's when finally I get the chance to do things my way. I get the chance to open doors up, and I get to stop asking the question of like, am I doing it right or wrong? Because it's always fucking both, you know? I want to look at the one Natalie said. Brandy says, love that. That's a big one and a good one. Natalie says, I feel that's the base of a beat goal. That's the base of a beat goal. Natalie, I don't know what that means. I could just be missing something, which is highly possible. But I want to use yours, which was thoughtfulness versus perfection. I think that's such a good one. Where it's like, where is the line between like, I want to be this like super thoughtful human who's really intentional with my work and my presence and all of that, and I want to best goal. Got it. I was like, I know there's something that's not clicking for me here, right? Hi, Megan. Where there's this difference between thoughtfulness and perfection, where thoughtfulness equals like being this really intentional, thoughtful person, and it can stretch into, and I'm trying to make everything perfect. And I think there's a dichotomy there too, where like naturally I want to be really intentional with my work, and I want to be really thoughtful with my work, and I don't want to gravitate so much to perfectionism. But part of being thoughtful and intentional with my work is striving for a high level of whatever perfection, I guess, in a way, right? And so I think that that's a really, really good one, where like you can find that dichotomy there, where like I can want to be thoughtful, and I can want it to, I guess not want it to be perfect, but where I want to be thoughtful, and I'm okay with the fact that sometimes that stretches into perfectionism, but I find that line for myself, right? And I think it really is about giving yourself that grace that you get to have it be a little bit of both, and that's not necessarily wrong. Like something that's true for me in my business is I am like a procrastinator by nature, because I'm kind of a control freak. And so I think procrastination for me is like a super adaptable thing, because it helps me not be such a control freak, because I just got to like get it done at the last minute and be kind of cool with how it goes. And that's been a both and for me, where it's like, I don't want to be a control freak, and I don't really want to procrastinate, but being able to be like, well, because I just kind of have some control freak tendencies, I procrastinate, but that like actually serves me, having the both as part of that and being okay with that, right? Yeah, both and, exactly. Finding the line goals. Marina says, so what is your spiritual practice? Do you decree deliberately the things you want to call in and be like, yeah, whatever, it would be cool to have this, or I 100% have this now, not get it, expect something bigger and better? Marina, I feel like for me, I really try to like live in the outcome. So if I like want a thing, I really try to be like living, behaving, and acting from that place, thinking from that place. But I feel like ultimately for me, when I'm in the outcome, like I feel good, I feel amazing, I feel high vibe, I feel like the things I want to feel. And so what I notice when I do that is that I recognize that like I can cultivate the feelings I want to have, right? I can cultivate the experience I want to have. And that allows me to detach from it having to be that thing, because I'm kind of already in the experience of it and I'm already creating the feelings I want to have. And so it makes me feel less attached to the thing because it makes me feel powerful. It's not like, well, if this thing will give me what I want. I'm like, oh, that's fucking cool. Like my ability to cultivate my own emotions and thoughts gives me what I want. Does that make sense? Okay, let's talk about another one. So one that I get asked about a lot, because a lot of my clients are, yeah, no problem. You're so welcome. Happy to share. A lot of my clients are further along in business. And so a lot of them are at this place where like they've created a lot of the things they set out to create. Like they have the, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50K months. They have the audience, they have the clients, they feel pretty solid. Things are good. Like, they feel in a place of abundance, right? And so this dichotomy of like being in abundance and creating more. So like, how do you create good from good, or how do you create great from great, is a conversation that comes up a lot. And so it's basically that dichotomy of like abundance versus creation, i.e. being in abundance and still being able to create from that place versus like creating in order to get to abundance. Does that make sense? I did a whole other live stream on this, which I think I can link up in here too, but this idea of like creating good from good and great from great. And I think that feels like a really big dichotomy too, because normally when we're creating, it's like to fill a hole, or it's from a place of a deficit, right? Like I don't have money, so I want to create money, versus like I kind of have all the money I really need at this moment, but how do I create more? And I think that that is a huge dichotomy to allow yourself to sit in, is this idea of like, it's okay to feel totally good and abundant and happy and grateful and at peace. And it's okay to simultaneously want to create more. And so being able to be in that together, where it's like nothing about where I'm at isn't good enough, and I still am ready for more. I feel like most of us, our tendency as humans is to try to create from a place of like, I don't have enough, it's not good enough. And that's where we try to create more from. And so being able to work through those emotions and those feelings of like, it's all good and I have what I want and I want to create more, is such a mind fuck sometimes. And that feels like such a dichotomy. But again, when you can be like, I'm so insanely grateful for what I have and I want more, instead of like, I'm not, I don't have everything I want, so I want to create more. Like it really can be both. And I just think as soon as you give yourself that permission, when you hear something in the online space, like be generous, and you're like, oh, but like, I don't know, because I'm someone with boundaries and I think the invite there is always to be like, what would that look like for me? How would that work for me? How do I make it both? Right? Because ultimately, everything in business is such a fucking dichotomy. Like the more, here's another good one. It's like the more you want to grow your audience, the less you grow it, but you have to be focused on growing it, right? It just feels so confusing sometimes. But when you can take away the confusion by being like, it can be both. I can be focused on growing it and not need it to be successful, right? Marina says that's the best space to create from. Marina, I agree with you, but I also think it's one that is sometimes the hardest to master. This is what I find the more clients I have that are further and further along, that it almost gets to a point where it becomes really challenging, where you feel like you've kind of just like ticked all the boxes and have everything you want, and to create from that space gets really hard and confusing sometimes. And I think it is the best space to create from, because you're bringing that vibe and that energy. But I think there's a lot of work there as well. Amy says, so much this is where I'm conflicted in the future of my business. Things are good, but what is the next step to continue to grow and challenge? Yeah, like, I think that's totally it, Amy. And I think you just, hit the nail on the head there, where sometimes we get to this place of like, but like, things are good. Am I supposed to want more? Am I not supposed to want more? Am I supposed to feel really challenged? Is it supposed to feel easy? And it's like all of it. It's supposed to feel good and you can want more. It's supposed to feel pretty easy and you're going to feel challenged. Like, it's always both. And I find that to be so true all the time. Like, one thing that I have come up with clients a lot is this idea of like, it can all be really good and things can feel hard. Like, I have a client right now who's basically like selling off all of her belongings and becoming a full-time, just digital nomad, full-time traveler. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's both. Like, it feels so good for her to be doing that. And also it feels so hard to be selling off your things and to be in that moment and to be trying to navigate how to run a business from the road and all of that. And it's still really good, right? And what most of us do is make one of those wrong. We're like, because I feel bad, something must be wrong. Maybe this is the wrong decision. Maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I should rethink it. Or we think, because it feels good, this should all feel good. It shouldn't feel hard to sell my belongings. And the fact that it seems hard to sell my belongings means there's something wrong with me. And it's like both, always both, right? Or like, because my business feels good, it shouldn't feel hard to create the next thing, or confusing to stretch to that next level. So we make that wrong. And it's like both. Like, sometimes it feels really hard to stretch to the next level when you've gotten everything you wanted, and it's okay that you feel both things. And when we give ourselves permission to be like these complicated, dynamic human beings who are experiencing multiple emotions at the same time, and who can be present in these dichotomies of like generousness and boundaries, creation and abundance. What were some of the other ones? Certainty and detachment, feeling good and pushing through, right? When we give ourselves permission to be in that, it is wild what is possible. So that brings me to some of the ways to be cool with that. Well, let me provide just like a tiny bit of context there. Marina says, yes, allowing chaos and flow and accepting both is correct. Exactly. So my word of the year was is havingness. It's only July, right? My word of the year is havingness. And I am just so obsessed with this word. I have been so deep in the reflection of this word. And recently I even made this whole thing that I'm calling the havingness model, which is kind of like built on my lessons and philosophy around expanding my havingness. So maybe I should even say what that word means for me, but basically like expanding my ability to have more and more good things. So I felt like rolling into this year, I had cultivated so many of the things I want, the business I wanted, the life I wanted, the home, the love, the experience, like everything, right? And my work was, well, how do I be comfortable having more and still calling more good in? And I just was sitting in that dichotomy, and like really have done so much self-work on that. And, will be for forever, and definitely for the rest of the year, because it's my word. And if you know me, I go super fucking deep on my word. So I created the havingness model, which I will link up in here for you to download, because I think it's super helpful and just like really helps you look at like, how can I expand my ability to have more good things? And what I have realized in looking at that is this piece of it all being a dichotomy. And what I have realized is that it absolutely requires three things. Like, hands down required three things. But first, I want to read Brandy's comment before I tell you the three things. Let's build some suspense. Brandy said, oh my God, I had a similar experience. I'm trying to get rid of stuff and it's hard. And I'm just in this space of like, what am I missing? Maybe it's just that, leaning into both. Brandy's nail on head, right? macro, it feels good to clean things out and get rid of them. Micro, it feels really hard sometimes, right? It feels confusing and difficult and hard to make those choices. And in the moment, it feels tough, right? And when you can be like, it's okay that it's both and lean into both, I think that that's where the magic happens. I think we keep ourselves stuck so often by watching ourselves so closely and thinking if something feels in slight conflict to the other something, it means we're wrong. And I think, again, the number one thing that's changed everything for me is realizing that those things don't have to be in conflict. Like, it can be both at the same time all the time. And then I stop watching myself and fighting with myself and start leaning in, right? And so I think that's a perfect example with cleaning things out. It's like, it's both. It's for sure both, right? Okay, so 3 things for having this and that are applicable to letting it be a dichotomy. Then the first one is self-trust. I mean, that's the most important one here, and it's just a non-negotiable. It's like, do I trust myself to navigate these dichotomies and figure out what's best for me and not make myself wrong? So I'm going to use your example, Brandy's, which is the giving things away. Like, I have to trust myself that neither emotion is wrong. It can feel really exciting to do this, and it can feel really hard. And if I can trust that I can have an emotion and it not be wrong, but I can just acknowledge it and trust myself enough to know it's okay, everything gets easier. And here's the bonus: if I can trust myself enough to know that I can handle any emotion, if I can trust myself enough to know that I can sit in both of these emotions, it all starts feeling easier. I'm not watching myself so closely. I'm not making myself wrong. I'm not sticking myself in a box. I'm not moving forward until I figure out, here's what it is. Here's a good way to say it. Sorry, took me a minute to get here, but we just got here. It's like not trying to resolve the dichotomy before moving forward. Take that in for a second. Not trying to resolve the dichotomy before moving forward. That's what so many of us do. I want to resolve these 2 things before I can move forward. Like, I want to decide if I'm certain or detached, and I spend all this time in a box trying to remove the dichotomy, right? Or I want to decide if I do what feels good or if I push myself, and I spend all this wasted time and energy and effort trying to resolve that dichotomy to move forward. And so then what people will do is go, well, I only ever do what feels good. That's where they come to that resolution. And then it looks like them just being really fucking flaky a lot of the time, right? Or they go, I only ever push myself, and it looks like them burning themselves the fuck out. So not only did they waste the time, energy, and effort it took to resolve that dichotomy, but they completely condensed down their experience, and now they're either burning out or being really inconsistent. And if you don't spend any time trying to resolve that dichotomy and go, of course it's both, it's always both, of course it's both, and I can move forward from there, that's when you lighten your own load. And that's why I've been able to move forward so much faster in my business, because I know that things can feel good and hard at the same time, because I know that I can be certain and detached, because I'm not spending any time trying to make the dichotomy go away. So Brandy's, for example, could sit in this idea of like, it feels hard to give things away, and then get herself completely stuck. I don't think you're doing this, but we're just going to use that example. And she could get herself completely stuck where it's like, I can't move forward on any of this until it all feels good, or I decide not to do it. And so I'm like in a purgatory all the time. Does that make sense? And so when you come to that place of, I don't have to resolve it, it's just always going to be a dichotomy, there's always going to be both and, so much easier to move forward. So much easier to trust yourself, right? Because you're like, yeah, this is normal. I can trust this, instead of like, I can't be trusted because I have somewhat opposing thoughts or feelings or emotions, right? I can't be trusted if I want to be generous and have boundaries. So I have to figure out what's wrong with myself here. Does anybody relate to that, where it becomes this thing that just sticks to you and makes you feel like your emotions and feelings aren't right, and erodes your trust? right? And so that's why it has been such a fucking game changer for me and has saved me so much angst and suffering along the way. It's because I just move forward faster and because I just trust myself through it, right? Let me know if you're listening and if that makes sense. Sometimes I get a little like, woo, in explaining things, but hopefully that resonated. Okay, so self-trust was one of them. The second one is enoughness. So I have to feel fundamentally enough. If I don't feel enough, I'm going to second guess myself a lot more and I'm going to think I'm not doing something good enough or right enough. So when I feel that dichotomy, I'm going to think, well, I don't know enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing it right enough, right? Like if I'm feeling the dichotomy of like having boundaries versus being generous, and I don't feel just like fundamentally enough, what am I going to do? I'm going to make myself wrong at every turn. When I'm overly generous, I'm going to be like, oh, see, like I proved myself way too much there. I really over delivered and I like shouldn't have shown up that way. When I set a boundary, I'm going to be like, see, I didn't give enough. I should have been more generous. And everything becomes this thing where you're not doing it good enough or right enough. Instead of being like, it's always a dichotomy. Sometimes I'm going to have really good boundaries because that's going to be really important to me. Sometimes it's going to feel really good to flex those boundaries for the right person or situation, and that's going to feel really good to me. And neither of them have anything to do with how enough I am or how good I'm doing it or if I'm doing it well enough, right? Like, how freeing is that? You know, when it can be both, when it doesn't mean that you're not enough, when it doesn't mean that you're not good enough, where you're not using that dichotomy as a way to make yourself wrong at every turn, right? And then the last one, it's so simple, but it's just so obvious, right? Which is gratitude. So as far as the dichotomy of it, I think it's like the gratitude for it being able to be both. Like, I know something that I am like massively grateful for when I think about this is like, I'm so grateful that I can like, I'm just using these examples, right? But that I can have boundaries and be generous. Like, it's so cool that I can protect myself and my energy and my time and be super generous with the humans I serve. I'm so grateful for the fact that I can be really certain and clear of the outcome I want. I'm so grateful that I can give myself that gift of certainty. And I'm so grateful that I know how to detach and not put all of my self-worth in that. I could go on and on. But if you have those three things, it's so easy to navigate these dichotomies. It's so easy to call in more and have more and create more. If you're letting these dichotomies stick you, make you not trust yourself, make you feel not enough, make you feel ungrateful for what you've created or what you have, you will stay in the same hamster wheel over and over of trying to resolve it so you can move forward, or making yourself wrong every time you feel these opposing things or these opposing thoughts. Not being able to be stressed and happy at the same time, or, right, like feel good and have to push yourself at the same time. When you resolve that in your own mind and give yourself that permission, it's just so easy to move forward in business. It's so easy to create more. When you're constantly bashing these two opposing things against each other and trying to find that perfect resolution, you'll just stay on that hamster wheel for like eternity. Right? And it'll erode your self-trust, it'll erode how enough you feel, it'll make you feel ungrateful and not happy with what you have, and on and on and on. So I really hope that this was helpful, because I think you can apply it to the online space, because I think that everything is so polarizing in this space. Like, it has to be this thing or it has to be this thing. And it's like just so often both and, right? And when you can take in all the noise in the online space through that filter, oh my God, it is like the most freeing thing of all the things. So I would love to know if that was helpful for you, what questions you have. If you can share with us a dichotomy that you're allowing yourself to sit in, like Natalie did, like Brandy's did. I think it's so helpful to see other people's. Probably you wouldn't have even thought of a couple of the ones that I mentioned unless I had mentioned them, because it's hard to see this when it's in action sometimes. Oh, uh-oh. My light was like about to take a tumble. it's hard to see this in the moment sometimes. So when you can step back and look at it, it becomes so obvious. Like, oh, that person's saying I should push myself and hustle hard, and that person's saying I should do what feels good. And it's both, right? Like, I think Gary Vee is such a great example of that. This is just a tangent, but like, he talks so much about like hustling and pushing himself and whatever, but you can just tell watching him that that fundamentally feels so fucking good to him too. Like, it lights him up. And there it goes. I think my dog's laying on it. Yep, sure is. It lights him up. It excites him. It energizes him. It feels so, so good, right? Which is why it's both. And so he's not saying feel shitty all the time so you can hustle, right? And again, it's like the same with people that you notice are like really, really, really detached. And you're like, oh, like, maybe I should be more like that and less certain, or people that you notice are really certain, they're probably bringing a little bit of the other to the table. Oh my God, she's crazy right now. Now she's like scratching herself on my desk, so it's shaking. Sorry about the camera. But like, that's the thing, right? Is it's really always both. And most people that you see that are just killing it in one of these areas is because they have embraced that dichotomy and they have embraced it being both. And they have given themselves enough self-trust and enoughness and permission and gratitude for it to play out like that, right? So I hope this was really, really useful. I think it's probably going to take a little bit to like sit in and let yourself process this, but if you can do it, you will have so much freedom to move forward faster. You will create much bigger results much faster. I will also drop the link for the having this model in, because I think that's a really, really, really important complement to this. If you guys have any questions, oh, one thing I did want to address, I got a few messages today asking if the last spot for the value-centered sales mastermind is full for July, and it is. I said that was like, was it negative? Like, oh, it is. I mean, obviously thrilled that that spot is full and so excited for the person who took it, but obviously I know that's a bummer if it was on deck for you. So if it was, know that we will probably do one more round this year, I believe. So get on the wait list, alituplife.com/value-centered sales. I'll drop that link here too, but July is full. I believe we'll be launching again in October, and I think one spot for October is already spoken for. So if you want it, if you missed it this time, let me know. I hope you guys have a beautiful week. I will be back here Mondays at 5 from now on. So find me here. If you want to rewatch any of the MSC marathon videos, they're on my business page, A Lit Up Life. Okay, I love you guys. Have a beautiful week. Bye.